everyone, I'm Annie, and I don't read. Before 2024, I was part of that group that hasn't really read a book for fun since middle school. So this year, I decided that I was going to start reading, and I'm here to document and bring you all along for my reading adventures. Hey guys, welcome back. We have 13 books to get through this month, so I'm going to get right into it. The first book I technically finished at the end of January, but it's not in my January recap, so we are going to add it in this one. It is T.J. Klune's The House in the Cerulean Sea. This book is about a man who is a caseworker in the Department of Magical Youth or Magical Children, and his job is to go to these orphanages or these houses of magical children and basically make sure that they're up to code, up to standard, and there's no like abuse or anything bad going on. And he gets assigned to a very special location that has very special magical children. And the story is about him finding family in unexpected places. Overall, I love this book. It is extremely heartwarming, and there were moments in the book where I could physically feel my heart swell, and I definitely cried a little bit at the end. And one thing that I really like too is that the character development of the main character is very subtle, so you don't realize how much he's actually changed until the end, where there's a obvious comparison between him at the start and him where he is at the end. So overall, really loved it. I rated it a 5 out of 5. Okay, this next one. This was actually a recommendation from another colleague, and this is Calypso by David Sedaris. And this is actually the first non-fiction book that I have read since the beginning of this year, and it's a little bit of an interesting non-fiction book. It's basically these just like small snippets of his life that are meant to be funny. And I say meant to be because I did not really enjoy this book very much. I didn't find many of the stories or snippets really that funny. There were a couple that got a little like chuckle out of me, but overall a lot of the snippets are just kind of like day-to-day life and just like some funny things about them. There's one about like a Fitbit watch, kind of like, you know, controlling your activity, and it's like, oh, did I even run? Did I even walk, or did I even run if it's not on my Fitbit or my Apple Watch? And I thought that one was pretty funny or cute, probably because it was the only one I could actually relate to. But for instance, like the very first one has to do with how one of the kind of like great things in life or measures of success is when you have a guest bedroom available. And I'm just like, I'm like, okay, sure. I don't get it. I have a guest bedroom. I'm like, it's fine. So yeah, it is what it is. It just was not my type of humor, I guess. I actually don't know what type of humor it was at all. But regardless, I gave this a 2 out of 5. Next one is a very hyped up book, or was a very hyped up book, I think around Book Talk or somewhere in book social media, but it is Circe by Madeline Miller. And I also really enjoyed this book. What it's about is Circe, who is a goddess, the daughter of Hermes and Perse, I think. I don't have the summary on me right now. And it's essentially about her life as sort of the black sheep of the family. She doesn't have the power of her father, and she's not this like beautiful nymph like her mother. And so there are a lot of different things that happen throughout her life because she's a bit of an outcast from the gods and goddesses. And this is a book that I enjoyed way more after I finished it and kind of like thought back on it than while I was actually reading it. While I was reading it, initially it was kind of just like a story being told, right? It's just the life of this goddess and the people she meets, the things that happen to her, just these events in her life. After you finish the book and you kind of think back to her whole life, it's extremely satisfying, or maybe dissatisfying for some people. It felt extremely complete. And I think the ending of the book also wrapped everything up really well too. It closed the loose ends, and I think it was a very satisfying ending for Circe herself too. I rated this a 4.5 out of 5. On Goodreads, it is a 5 out of 5 though. Alright, this next section I'm going to do in a batch because it is a continuation of a series that I started off in January. It's a series of novellas, the Wayward Children series, and this month I read books 2 through 5. So we are going to do them all in this one section. And as a recap to what the Wayward Children series is, it is a series of novels about these children in this house. At some point in their childhood or in their past, they found a door to another world. And the worlds can be different across all the children. They could potentially go to the same world. But regardless, they went to these worlds, they came back, and they're trying to find a way back because those worlds are like their true home. Unfortunately, I can't actually talk too much about each of these individual books because they all expand upon the first book. The first book introduces a lot of characters and it's quite fast-paced. I had mentioned that like that first book could have been like a 300 to 500 page book by itself because like so much kind of like random stuff happened. Not really random stuff happened to it, but like there were some major things that happened that were very sudden. And I realize now after reading the next, 2 through 5 books that it was because like it was going to be expanded into all of these other books. So the second book tells the backstory, is a prequel to the first of a couple of twins that are a major plot point in the first book. The third book, Beneath the Sugar Sky, is about something else that happens in the first book, and they go on this quest, which is one of the rules of the house that they can't go on quests, but of course they do. But they go on this quest in order to help this girl that like appeared and just like fell in a pond in like outside their house. But again, it is also attached to a major plot point of the first book, which is why I can't really say too much about it. And then 4. In an Absent Dream. This is actually my favorite book so far of the series, and this we can actually talk about a little bit because it's not a major plot point of the first book. In the first book, there is one character that is introduced, and she is sort of the assistant principal, not assistant principal, but assistant teacher, headmaster person of the house, and she is very smart, but you find out in the first book that she is aging backwards. So every year she is getting younger, even though she's actually maybe like 50 years old or something like that. And you find out basically the story of why she is aging younger and how she became this way. And I really liked this book, especially the ending, because the feeling that you get at the end is just so devastating. It is like a big old sigh at the end, and it was very, I don't know if it would be satisfying, but it was satisfying to me, and it was just a very emotional and devastating impact, which is what I like in my books because I tend to like depressing books. Yeah. All right, and last one, Come Tumbling Down. This is the 5th book of the Wayward Children series. This goes back to the twins of the 2nd book, but this continues on their story, and this is a bit like the 3rd book in that it's another sort of quest. Generally, I think the quest ones are my least favorite, but now we go into the ratings. 2nd book, I rated a 4 out of 5. 3rd book, Beneath the Sugar Sky, 3 out of 5. 4th book, In an Absent Dream, 4.5 out of 5. And, Come Tumbling Down, book number 5, 3 out of 5. Nice. All right, next set of books we're also going to do in a batch. This is going to be a smaller batch, but it's also a continuation of a series. It is the Good Girl's Guide to Murder series, books 2 and 3. So book 2, Good Girl, Bad Blood. Book 3, As Good as Dead. For Good Girl, Bad Blood, this is also going to be a little bit tough to talk about because a lot of it is, a continuation from the first one. But after solving the murder of the first book, Pip starts a podcast, which I think is a pretty fun idea. And also, one thing I really like about the Good Girl's Guide to Murder books are the sort of interjections of interviews and like different ways that they're telling the story in between, so that it keeps things fresh and it makes it so that like the story moves along very smoothly, but also in a very not boring way. So they kept with that in the second book, and they added in the whole podcast idea too, which I thought was fun. The plot of the second book is that Pip starts off kind of concerned with how invested and how intense she got from the first book, and so she wants to tone it down, kind of doesn't really want to get to continue it basically, because the podcast originally only told the story of the very first murder that she solved, but in the second book someone she knows goes missing, and so she decides to start season 2 of the podcast and does it on trying to find this missing person because the police are useless. And I think that's really all you need to know initially about this book. It kind of goes along similar paths where she's investigating and interviewing a lot of different people. And then the ending kind of comes with a bit, I wouldn't say it's a twist, but I don't think I like this book as much as the first one, mainly because the ending seemed to have come out of nowhere. So I gave Good Girl Bad Blood a 4 out of 5, which is actually the same rating I gave the first Good Girl's Guide to Murder book, but I did like the first one just a little bit more. That being said, when I talk about the kind of like sudden or unexpected ending of the second book, everything kind of made sense once we got into the third book. And I really liked and really appreciated the third book because it made me realize how planned the whole series was. The third book really grabs things from the first and second, and then it like all comes full circle. And the third book, I'll say, is definitely much darker than the first and second. And I could talk a lot about the third book, but I won't because no spoilers. But I really liked it, and I think actually some people disliked the third book because it was darker and a bit different from the first and second. Generally, what I think how it's going to be is if you really liked the first and second book, you probably won't like the third book as much. If you liked the first and second but just thought they were okay, you'll probably like the third one more. I gave the third book of the series a 4.5 out of 5. This next book, I waited so long to read, or I didn't actually wait to read, but I was waiting so long to actually finally get it from the library because it was on hold. But it is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. Okay, I'm just gonna say Alex. Oh boy. Anyway, the plot of this book is that there is a woman who has seemingly murdered her husband by shooting him like 6 times, right? And after she kills him, she goes completely silent. She doesn't say anything. She doesn't confess. The police come and she is doesn't say anything, and she is brought to a mental asylum actually. And the main character is this psychotherapist, not like a normal therapist, but more medical. And he takes an interest in her case. And so he wants to go to this mental hospital and basically like try and get it out of her, try and understand like why she did it, if she really did it, and basically get her to start talking again and get her to tell a story of what happened. And this book, I think, so in my January recap, I talked about The Plot by Jean Henf Correlates. And you guys might know if you saw that first video that I did not like that book at all. But I think The Silent Patient is what the plot wanted to be, because there are a lot of parallels in how the story is told, where there's kind of like two parallel stories being told at the same time. In the plot, it was the main character author guy, and then at the same time it was the story of like the book that he took and published. And then this one is the story of the psychotherapist, and then of the wife who murdered her husband in like the form of like these diary entries, right? So it has a very similar format, of course, very different plots, and then also the way that everything kind of connects together at the end. That being said, I did get caught by the plot twist in The Silent Patient, which was very fun. I was like, oh, I was like, yes. I'm like, no way. And actually, because I read the plot first, I like got confused. Like I thought it was gonna go one way, and it did not go one way. It went another way. So the end was really interesting, and I also like sped through this. This wasn't even a book where I knew I was reading through it really fast. It was a book where I like finished before I realized it. I was like, oh shoot, I'm at the end. I'm like, oh my god, I'm done. But the ending was very satisfying. I liked it quite a bit. I gave this a 4 out of 5. Oof! This next one, it is Never Let Me Go by Kazuo Ishiguro. This is such an interesting book. I could talk for hours about this book. This book is this woman retelling her life and her story, having gone through this boarding school when she was young, and the boarding school is called Haoshan. But as you go through her story, you realize very early on that something's wrong, or not necessarily something's wrong, but you know very early on that they're like not normal people. You don't know what they are, and for the first 70 pages, you're just trying to figure out what they are, really, because the school is a little bit weird too, because the only thing that they care about with these students is their art and creativity. That's the only thing that they're graded on, is the kind of art, like the kind of good art they produce, the poetry that they write, their literature, and all different artistic things, right? And let me tell you, none of these things are spoilers either, what I'm telling you here, because it does not bring you any closer to the truth, to be honest. And I realize there are some books like Red Rising where everything is a spoiler. Like you can't talk very much about the book without giving away a spoiler, because like there's a spoiler in like each section. But this book, you could talk about like 80% of the book without giving away a spoiler, because there's like 2 major spoilers in the book, and they happen at 2 very specific times. And then after that, you're kind of done. Like you could talk about the rest of the book and not figure out what is going on. But anyway, going back to the school. So you find out very early on that they're not normal people, and that, you know, the school is kind of weird. They only care about creativity. And then you also find out that they can't have children, which seemingly sounds like a spoiler, but I swear to God it is not. But you're just like, okay, what the heck are they, right? And there are a lot of these terms that end up getting thrown around. But then at like page 76 or something, they just like punch you in the face with one reveal, and it's told in the most nonchalant way too. So you have to so the first time I read through it, I did a double take. I had to be like, what? Like, did I really just, like, what? I had to read through that again. I'm just like, what just happened? What? And it was so nonchalantly told. It was told like the rest of the book, which is very just kind of like, you know, a telling of a school drama, kind of, because she talks about how she has this friend Ruth, and they're kind of like on and off friends because Ruth cares a lot about her image and kind of like, you know, not lies but exaggerates things. And I'm like, oh, this is very, you know, classic school behavior. And then she talks about this other kid who's bullied and how she made friends with the bully, and they're really with the bullied kid, and they're really close. And then he ended up finally like not being bullied anymore after he like chilled out. But overall, it's a very like it's almost mundane retelling of like school life. But I'll say it's written very well, because I don't think there was a time I was particularly bored or anything like that. And it was also just like the want to like know what they are just like kept me going. So yeah, there's one reveal like about a third of the way into the book, and then it keeps going back to kind of like the school storytelling until they move to this other like training area or school area. They're still doing like schoolwork there, but they have a little bit more freedom. It's not really like classes per se. There's just like a group of them living together and in these like cottages. And then they take a trip somewhere, and there's another reveal that just like punches you in the face again, like nonchalantly. And you do the same thing. It's like another double take. You're like, what the heck? Like, what? Really? Okay. So then that happens, and then I think that's actually the point where the book falls off a little for me, because at that point you're about 2/3 of the way into the book, and you kind of figure out what's going on now. There isn't really anything all too much more that needs to be told for you to figure out what's going on until the very end, where everything like really gets cleared up and is fully wrapped up. And so my feelings about this book, I think, can be summed up very well in this Goodreads comment that I saw, where this is a book that will win a literary prize, but not a book that will be a bestseller. Some of the things other people felt after they finished the book, I didn't really feel as much, because if you look on Goodreads, and when I was talking to my friend who recommended this book, they talked a lot about like the sort of like despair they felt at the end of the book, and how it was just like, oh, like after you're done, it just feels like a weight on your shoulders. But for me, I feel like I did not get that that impact. So the feeling that I got from the book was more of this like acceptance feeling as opposed to despair. Especially at the end of the book when you figure out everything that's actually going on and then like what the characters discover. I thought that book was going to end another way, where they kind of just like reject everything and like run away. But if you guys know 7 stages of grief, like as opposed to rejection, I feel like it ends more with like acceptance, which I actually really liked. But because I didn't get that huge impact from the book as I maybe thought I was going to, or as other people said they did, I gave this a 3.5 out of 5. Okay, disclaimer for this next one. I actually got this book for free because my company had a talk with her and she was giving, and they were giving out the first 100 attendees a free book. But it is Rich AF, The Winning Money Mindset That Will Change Your Life by Vivian 2. This is the second nonfiction book I've read since the start of this, but it is the first self-help book. And I already know, I think that I don't do too well with nonfiction, at least, I mean, my sample size is small. But I have some colleagues that only read self-help books, and I truly don't know how they do it. I am like, that is extremely impressive, but I could not. Like, I want to read for pleasure. Regardless, it'll be a little bit tough to review this book, mainly because I am not the target audience. The book is, like the title says, meant to teach you about financial literacy and kind of a lot of different parts of it. So there's some things about budgeting, there's some things about investment, there's some things about like your general savings and checkings accounts. I think it's a really good general summary of like a lot of things that you need to know, especially for any beginners who kind of want to learn more about financial literacy or kind of get their own finances in order. That being said, I consider myself a very financially savvy person, so there wasn't really all that much that I learned from the book because I know and do a lot of it already. Which is why I say I'm not really the target audience. That being said, I do think the book is written in a very easy to digest way. It's written in her voice. If you listen to her talk at all or listen to any of her TikToks, you can tell that the book is written in the way that she speaks. So it's very easy to read, I think pretty easy to digest. Depending on your interest, some of the book might be like a little boring, or if you like already know the stuff. But there were a couple of things even I learned too on just like definitions of things and how certain things worked. Regardless though, I gave this a 2.5 out of 5. Again, I am not the target audience, so which is why my rating is probably going to be a little bit lower. But if you're interested in, you know, financial literacy and getting more financially savvy, I think this would probably be a good like starting book for it. Alrighty, final book of this month. I finally read Babel, or Babel, I actually don't know how to pronounce this book, by R.F. Kuang. This was the first book that I read on my Kindle actually, and I read it while traveling. So I don't know if that ended up impacting how much I liked the book or not, but regardless, I thought reading on the Kindle was pretty good. It's a pretty long book. The plot is actually very complex when you think about it. But it's about this kid who is from China, and he's from a Cantonese speaking area. But he speaks both Mandarin and Cantonese, and he is taken from his home after his like region is decimated by this disease, and he's taken from his home by an Englishman and brought to UK and in the 1800s or so. So this is historical fiction plus fantasy, and he is taken there and brought up as like an Englishman. So the culture of the UK back then, and ultimately this is to enroll him into Oxford in order to get into the translation unit, and he does. Not that he had to test or anything, because his father is, or the one who took him, is a professor at the translation unit who also speaks Mandarin. And the reason why the translation unit is very important, it is the most prestigious department of Oxford at this time, and it also has this big tower called Babel, or Babel, is because there are these silver bars that you can embed powers in using translations. That's the reason why translation is so important. It's how like the trams run, how ships are able to like catch a lot of fish. It's embedded in society almost in the way that electricity is. It's like their version of electricity almost. And there's also this secret society that is like smuggling these silver bars. And that's where I think I'm going to end the plot summary, because then it starts getting into a lot of the main parts of the book. I did quite like the book. There were definitely some parts where that kind of felt a little bit slow, because there's a good chunk of the book that is just kind of about his school life and his friends in the translation unit, which is very important to set the scene. And then about the last third of the book, it really picks up. And when I say it really picks up, it really picks up. I'm like, shit hits the fan. But it almost picks up a little too hard, honestly. It's like shit hits the fan, and it's like, oh shit, it really hits the fan. Like like a lot of stuff happened in that last third of the book where I was just like, oh, wow, like, yeah. That being said though, I really enjoyed the end of the book in particular. And there's definitely a couple like full circle moments that you notice that I quite liked. I gave it a 4 out of 5. And I think I might try out one of R.F. Kuang's other books, Yellowface, which is also very popular. So, but I might try that one out a little bit later, because once again, the plot sounds kind of similar to the plot, which I am an absolute hater about. So yeah. That is my February recap. Hope you guys enjoyed, and let me know how you guys felt about any of these books in the comments below. Alright, see you guys next month. Bye.